Hey, welcome back to Chasing Greatness. We're really glad you're with us. This week we're talking about culture. We got Mark Miller with us. He's written a new book called Culture Rules. Been so gracious with your time, and we're excited about getting to talk to you about how to animate your culture. That's where we left you yesterday. We're talking about building a culture by design, not by default. Most leaders, if they're not careful, busyness will creep in. The business gets kind of, sometimes even success makes it hard. We get going fast. And we can take our eye off this culture thing, but I think it really does go back to something you talked about earlier. You give these rules. Can you sort of set up the game of culture? I mean, you talk about it as a game. Can you set that up for us?
Let me give a little context. As we did the work I mentioned in our last episode, and we actually literally talked to leaders all over the world. In addition to the quant work, we did survey after survey after survey after survey with leaders, and it's complicated. I mean, culture is complex, and it's hard to get your head around. Some people think it's really, really squishy. It's actually strategic, but yet it's an unseen force. And so people have trouble with, well, how do you steward and manage and create something you can't see? Well, the elements that create that force are within a leader's control, by and large. It's what people see, it's what they hear, it's what they experience, and it's what they believe. Now, giving that definition to it makes it a little more approachable, but we said it's still too complicated. And we sat in rooms for days trying to figure out, how do you make it simple without making it simplistic? Of course, if you make it simplistic, game over, we all lose, right? And we actually found our inspiration from the Navy SEALs. And I know you've done some study. I don't know how many people in the audience have actually dug deep into the ethos and the ways of the SEAL. But their mantra is to shoot, move, and communicate.
Yeah.
Now, they'll tell you that's not all you need to do to be a SEAL, but that's what you need to do to win the day and survive
if you're
the
in
day,
a battle.
to fight another day,
yeah,
right? And we said, if they can find that level of simplicity in all of the complexity and the dynamic world that they operate in, it gave us confidence to push forward.
Yeah.
And where we netted out, there's a concept called the magic circle. And it's
in the book. I mean, get the book. If you haven't ordered the book,
Yeah.
I'm going to give a plug.
Okay.
Go to leadeveryday.com, get the book. But the magic circle in the very beginning, it's fantastic.
The magic circle is a concept used by game designers.
Yeah.
And they are trying to create an environment that people can enter into, suspend judgment, adopt the rules and norms of the game, engage fully, and have fun.
Yeah.
And we said, okay, what are the rules of building culture? That is the game, is building culture. And lucky for us, and I would argue for leaders around the world, that we only found 3 rules.
we like less.
Remember, we said yesterday there's this huge gap between the leader's intellectual assent to the concept of culture and then how they use their time.
Right. They all say it's important, but very few of it's 12th on the list. Did you say? Yeah.
Well, in part because I think it's not concrete enough. It's not specific enough. Yeah. And I think many leaders fear that there are 1,000 things they have to do.
Right.
There are only 3 rules.
There are only 3. All right. So before we jump into these rules, what if you got a person who doesn't like rules? Like, you do have leaders out there that go, "It's too squishy. I don't want to work on it." Their business is still going. I mean, that default mindset sometimes, or I just don't want to be put into a box. Don't tell me exactly how I have to do it. Like, you're trying to change my culture. I mean, can you speak to that person?
Okay, I've got several things I would say to that person. First of all, there is a lot of data that I will not get into. Much of it is in the book about the value of a high-performance culture, a thriving and dynamic culture. It is a great strategy. So if you don't want to be bothered by it, I think you have chosen to sub-optimize your performance.
You're leaving results on the table.
You're leaving results on the table.
Yeah.
For those that might be in the camp, rules feel too restrictive, I would say, hang on just a minute. Imagine your favorite sport with no rules. Like, think about football with no rules. Now, you may be thinking rugby. No. I'm talking about no rules.
No lines, no...
It would be chaos.
It'd be chaos.
It would be chaos. And there's no way that you could engage in the game, much less be successful. So I would argue the rules help you understand the boundaries, the parameters. They actually outline how to be successful. Now, the flip side is also true. If you violate the rules, you lose. Well, I want to know the rules, particularly when we think about culture. I don't want to lose. The stakes are too high.
Yeah, and talk for a second about, like, you've been in this culture, you said yesterday, for 40 plus years. You've seen, you've been in this organization. I say you've been in this culture. This culture has changed probably many times over the years, been in a different department. You've started a department. Sometimes you've bottlenecked the culture. Sometimes you've made the culture better. Like this is hard over time, right? It's like you got to keep working on it. Can you talk about that?
Well, I'll say a word about it. That's our third rule, so I don't want to say too much.
That's good.
But a healthy culture is a living, breathing organism.
Yeah.
And leaders have to treat it with the respect that a living, breathing organism deserves.
Yeah. So is there a question or two that I should ask myself if I'm leading a culture, somebody's listening, and they're leading that culture? What is the question to ask myself as I'm considering whether I want to, tomorrow we'll get into the rules, but before I do, like, is there a way to calibrate where I am, my reality? You've talked about some of that and being grounded in reality, confronting truth. Like, talk about that today to land us there.
Yeah. Are you seeing patterns of unhealthy and unproductive behavior? Let's flip it around. Are things happening exactly like you want them to happen? If not, that's a culture issue.
You've got work to.
That's a culture issue.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Okay, so the question for you today is, do you have these patterns around you of things that are not like you want them to be? If so, you're going to want to join us for these next few episodes. We're going to get into the rules. Tomorrow, we're going to start with the first one, which is to aspire. I want you to start thinking about what kind of culture you want. Mark's going to talk about that in our next episode. Thanks for joining us. I hope you'll share with somebody and come back tomorrow as we continue our conversation with Mark. We love you guys.